Hi everyone, I'm Jemima Joseph and I'm honored to be reading for Campus Literature Week. Firstly, hi Daniela. So I'm going to be reading two things, a short story entitled Somebody Outside My Window, so you can pretend that's like an audiobook and you're going about your daily routine listening to it, and a poem called Maybe If I Then They Wouldn't. So, gonna start. Somebody Outside My Window. I was in an unnaturally bright room. With one eye shut, I took in the curtains drawn aside at the bay window, and the bay window cracked open. Wait, this is my room, my groggy brain processed. The light adjusted, and what was that noise coming through the window? Music? Chatter? Who knew? I just couldn't believe I fell asleep early again. I stared at the clock in front of me reading 12:20 and groaned loudly. Not tonight. Are we sleeping tonight? I screamed. Hush, girl, room 12 shouted from her room behind mine. Sorry. I rolled off the bed with little effort, making a louder thud than I intended. I paused, for room 12 was sure to scold. Nothing. I hopped my way into a standing position, all the while convincing myself that if I went through my nightly routine slowly, the pace would lull my brain into a kip, even if that meant sleeping in front of my mirror with chunks of shea butter on my face. This occurrence had been happening for a week. I'd wake up, unsure of when I fell asleep, groggy and regretting life, then I'd suffer tiny intervals of rest before knocking out fully. And I think the nighttime routine would have worked too if whatever noise heralding from outside had not intensified. It sounded like singing this time, tuneless, but I stayed put, again thinking room 12 would handle it. She was weirdly silent that night. A squawk breezed through the window and I clenched my fist, feeling exhaustion in my palms. Did I even care enough to deal with this? I've slept through noise before, I thought. This is alright for me. It sounded like whale calls anyway, a little white noise to soothe. I placed my head on the table in front of me. Then the voice started wailing. What? I stormed towards my window, pushing it open further. A bush of tousled hair 1 story below shifted on their feet. Are you dying? Shut up. People want to, oh my god, I screamed. The hair looked up at me. Their face was caked in mud. Sackcloth hung loose and rumpled on their body. It was hard to zero in on defining marks of their silhouettes, but those facial features, their stance, it was undeniable. I was not anticipating this creature. They showed us intensive diagrams of their type and how to handle them if they became a threat. Strategies, war stories, rules of combat, and emergency kits. And here I stood unprepared. How had no one taken notice of this? A male? In our front yard? Maybe if you would help me, I would stop singing. The male sustained that last word poorly. I flinched, frozen, hand on the window. Was no one else seeing this male? Hearing them nonetheless? What's the pronoun again? He, him. How did the male even get on this side of the island? It had been a no-male zone for more than 50 years since the treaty that segregated us. So how did the male make it across? I should go call the headmistress. Else the both of us would get in trouble, I thought. She would know how to handle males the best. She was around before the treaty was signed. She even helped design the barriers that prevented their entry. An expert needed to deal with this. I took my hand off the window, already stepping back when the male made a pitiful sound, locking gaze with mine. Even from here I could read them. It swirled with hurt, confusion, and a silent plea. This was not in the books. Nothing was said about them being able to exhibit delicate emotions. Even now, women only used those when it was necessary. Then the male started crying. Males cried when they trained to completely shut off the parts of their brain that registered those emotions. One of the reasons why we had to separate was because they expected us to act the same. But there he was, crying harder than room 7 usually did on our allotted day of tears. I think that's what made me unfreeze. Delicate emotions drew me in. Or maybe it was drawn to me. I couldn't count how many times this had gotten me in trouble. I climbed over onto the ledge. It had stairs there leading straight to his location. I had no idea of what would happen, but I was curious. Or maybe I was still asleep. I wouldn't know until I reached down, I thought, taking that step. that first step. My mind was racing. I only knew of what I was told. Males were harsh, entitled, lacking empathy. They wanted to control us women and the natural world in general. The separation was necessary because they kept placing women on the lower rungs. We needed to detach from that toxic atmosphere to become better, to thrive. That was in complete juxtaposition to the sight before me, which triggered a memory. The sight talked about how all that wasn't true. There were good ones, supposedly, but those utterances were mere whispers in comparison. When I reached here, I glanced down. One foot hesitated over the grassy surface. Doubt gripped me. If this was not a dream, I'd be putting myself in danger. A thud. I looked up and the male was on the ground, shoulder slumped, looking small. The male sniffled. I took the last step, reducing space between us. He mumbled something. What? I whispered back, stooping down to 2 feet away from him. The male looked up, eyes matching the night. The story in them flickered with exhaustion, like this was common for him. Can you help me? Something else in our locked gaze. But how could there be recognition? I had never met one before. This was my first face-to-face interaction with their kind. I'll help you. I said this without hesitation, my body moving towards him, taken by a different energy, which somehow became more and more familiar the closer I got. It still didn't make sense, but I kept thinking as I reached out to hold the male's hand, if I could just touch him, I'd know what to do. The male seemed to think that too and made his own tentative movements towards me. Our fingers, inches apart, his night eyes filled with hope. Then feedback from overhead screeched. It shocked both of us backwards. 10 seconds of disorientation crackled to a stop. My eyes fluttered open. The unnatural brightness had returned. Night was gone too. I looked around for the male, also gone. An intercom came on. That's another strike, room 13. Let's try this again. I really thought she would pass this time. I kind of hope she'd touch him. Yeah, she could tell us how male skin felt. What? It felt like my mind had been manually put on pause, but a few coherent thoughts were fighting to seep through, like how I was always too tired to question deeply my strange sleeping pattern, or why there were never any suspicious gaps in my memory to alert me of erasure, no strange marks on my body to clue me in on foreign activity. But I couldn't think on it for too long, because that same remote had pressed on my body's heating system. The warming started from my toes, pulling itself all the way up. The heat grew strange and deep as it reached my chest. My skin pulled in response like a giant blanket was tightening and swaddled around me. It stung. A meal. Emotions. Recognition. I was in an unnaturally bright room. So that's the first one. And the poem. Maybe if I and they wouldn't. Maybe if I could hang up my breast before stepping out, they'd meet my eyes first. Maybe if my thighs weren't so apparent, they wouldn't fist. Maybe if I could place my Bamsi in a case to be reattached when I retrace, they wouldn't suit me. Maybe if I could straighten out my curves, lingering gazes wouldn't map courses on my private property. Maybe if I had screw out and hide on there, they wouldn't have been tempted to play fast and seek. Maybe I should stop wear clothes that makes them want to peek. Maybe. What if? Nah. I don't want to be nice girl. I don't want to smile, now darling. I don't want to feel nervous while pumping gas. I don't want the small of my back to be the handle that gives access to your small pass. I don't want a gripping fear when I hear an engine slowed, aware of your eyes' roam, wondering what weapon of defense I could use against a beautiful good morning or psst, darky. I just want to wear jeans that make me walk confidently. I just want to be 12 at the side of the road waiting for a taxi. I just want to be Miss So-and-so daughter getting bread. I just want to reject you and not end up dead. But maybe if I just then they won't. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a lovely day.